Hi all, Krishna here. Welcome to Sversity. Sversity is a learning service from Koyya Enterprises, and this session is about introducing the MERN stack. The agenda for the day includes basically we try to understand what is full stack development. We understand what is this MERN stack is all about, and the role played by different other entities in the MERN stack, which includes JavaScript programming language, node environment, Express framework, MongoDB data platform, and finally, the React library. So you may come across this term several times, full stack development. Essentially, it refers to the act of developing an application full from front end to back end. Instead of in the maybe a decade ago or so, people used to develop just only front-end applications. Other people used to develop only just back-end applications and so on. But nowadays, we expect everybody to work on both front-end as well as back-end. And that's why we call them as full-stack developers rather than just front-end developers or back-end developers. But what is this front-end? Front-end is essentially the user interface of the system. When you go to an ATM, you see the screen through which you interact with the ATM, right? So that is front end. When you are logging into a banking website on your browser or mobile or wherever, that is front end. So it's essentially the user interface. This user interface can be standalone UI. For example, when you are having MS Excel, for example, spreadsheet, it's a standalone user interface. You need to install it on your machine and then you interact with it. Web UI is maybe the spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet online. So there also you have a spreadsheet, but you don't install anything. You just have the browser, you visit that URL and the spreadsheet is ready. You can just make use of it. There are some spreadsheet apps available on mobile devices also. That is also a user interface. Then you call it as mobile UI. So when you say like you are developing front end, you need to know whether that front end is going to be running as a standalone application, or it is going to be a web application, or will it going to be a mobile app. We need to be clear about that. Typically, these front ends are also called as clients. There is something called client-server architecture, right? You'll have some server in some location, and several of us connect to that server through our mobile devices or desktops and etc. Then we all the applications that are running on our machines or our devices tends to be typically as clients. So if somebody says that I'm developing the client part of the client server architecture, it usually refers to the front end. So as a full stack developer, you'll have to develop both front end as well as back end. When you say I'm developing front end, you may have to develop the front end as a standalone application, installable standalone application, or a downloadable browser-based application, web UI we call, or maybe a mobile app that you may install on your Android or any other mobile platform. Then what is backend? Backend is where the actual application functionality is implemented and executed. Frontend is typically for the end user to interact with the system, but the system is all about the backend. This is where you have the actual application functionality. For instance, if you are trying to apply for an examination, using the front end, you will upload all your data, but all this data has to be sent to the server that is there somewhere else. That is where all the backend processing happens. And if everything is going fine, then you will receive an acknowledgement on your front end. So the entire application functionality is typically run on a server, or which we also call as backend. The server or backend may consist of course, business layer or business tier, plus most likely a database. Even though it is optional, it's not that database should always be there in the backend. But most likely, if it is any non-trivial application, you definitely have some database running on the server side. The business layer is the one which does all the computation, whereas database handles the job of storing the data and retrieving the data. The database can be in the form of a relational database management system, RDBMS, like Oracle and etc. Or the database can also be a NoSQL database management system, like let's say MongoDB, Cassandra, and etc. All right. So as a backend developer, you need to know how to develop the business layer and also how to deal with the databases. As a front-end developer, you need to deal with the development of user interfaces. When you have the expertise in both these areas, then you can develop the application from end to end, and you become a full stack application developer. But it doesn't mean that you reinvent the wheel and come up with your own code and other things. Most likely what happens is you'll be using one or other technology suite or technology suite, however you pronounce, to develop these full stack applications. And MERN is one of them. What is MERN? MERN stands for 4 different, I would say, components of this full stack suite: MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. If you abbreviate them, it becomes MERN. MongoDB is a data platform. We said, like, in the backend, we need to have some database, right? In the MERN stack, you'll be using MongoDB as the data platform, which is a NoSQL database. And we also need to do some computation on the server side by receiving the client requests and etc. We said, right? That job is done by the Express framework, which is a web-based framework for exposing your business tier. React is the library which you'll be using to build the UI components for the user interface. And Node is where Node is a server environment where all these Express, MongoDB, or React, or whatever you want to have, can be hosted on. Right? So that way, these 4, MongoDB as the backend database, Express to expose the backend functionality, React is to act as the user interface, and Node as the underlying platform is what forms the MERN stack or MERN environment. But MERN is not the only full stack technology suite. You have several others also. You may develop applications using Java full stack suite or Python full stack suite. You can use several other alternatives also. If you, there is something called MERN stack as well. MERN stands for everything else is same except for R, right? In the MERN, M is Mongo, E is Express, N is Node, whereas R is replaced with A. Instead of React.js, here people use Angular for the development of user interface. Typically, Java full stack developers use Spring Boot for developing the backend and may use React or Angular for the front end. Same thing with Python full stack as well. They use React or Angular as the front end, and Django, Flask, and etc. For developing the business layer in the backend. One of the interesting thing about MERN stack is that most of these things, right? MongoDB, Express, React, Node, not most actually, all these 4 can be, you can actually master all these 4 once you have some idea about the language called JavaScript. JavaScript language plays a very much important role in this MERN stack. So what is this JavaScript programming language? I'm sure you are aware of it. You might have already coded something in this. It is popularly known as simply JS, or JavaScript is known as JS. It's based on a standard called ECMA standard. People interchangeably use these words. Some people call it as ECMA script or JavaScript, JS, ES, and etc. For the practical point of view, maybe these are all same, but in strict theoretical sense, ECMA is essentially the standard and JavaScript is its implementation. So JavaScript is an interpreted language. You don't require to compile and then distribute. Rather you can just write your code in JavaScript and just distribute that code. Wherever you want to run this, you need to have a JavaScript interpreter which can directly execute your code. This is also termed as a dynamically typed language, in the sense, unlike in the case of C language or C++ and Java and etc., you do not define or you do not declare the types for the variables and etc. Variables, constant, etc. You don't declare the types. Rather, you just declare the variable or constant just like that without declaring the type, and the language system or the underlying interpreter would detect what is the type based on the value that you assign there. Because the value may keep changing and along with the type also may keep changing. That's why we call it as a dynamically typed language, which is good as well as bad. It is good, so your development experience will be a lot easier, a lot smooth, but it is bad when you are developing very large scale applications. Debugging the applications would maybe become a challenge. JavaScript supports object-oriented programming approach as well as functional programming approach. If you know these words, good news is that JavaScript supports both of them. It also supports asynchronous programming, so you can increase the performance and throughput of the system. It supports modular programming also. You can develop independent modules and you can integrate those modules to build various applications. So when you're learning Java programming language, you'll be learning all these things. Should we invest in this language really? For many people, JavaScript is a language that you use for developing the front end, but that is not correct actually. It's not just a language for building the web pages. You can use it in both development of front end as well as in development of the back end. When you are developing it on the back end, you will be using the Node platform. As of now, it is Node. You are seeing different other platforms are also coming into picture recently, but Node is the most popular one or most deployed platform. So Node is essentially server environment, right? Server means you need to deal with your databases, your operating system, sockets, files, and etc. The Node is the one which provides you those system calls in the form of JavaScript API. That means even if you want to deal with the database or file system or sockets or other network and other things, you can still write all that code just by using JavaScript as long as you are going to run that code on the Node platform. As we already know, React.js is essentially a framework for a front end, which is again written in JavaScript. In fact, the Express.js framework is also written in JavaScript. That means once you know JavaScript programming, you can work with all of these components of MERN full stack. Okay, so if you haven't given much importance to JavaScript programming language, maybe it's the time for you to look at it seriously. To work with the MERN stack, a few things that you may have to acquire first. You require an IDE, right? You don't write code in Notepad and other things. That is a waste of time. So you require an integrated development environment or IDE. For JS development, typically people use often something called Visual Studio Code or VS Code in short. Okay, so make sure that you have Visual Studio Code so that you can actually start doing something with the JavaScript. Remember, learning JavaScript is mandatory to work on MERN stack, without which you don't do anything with MERN stack. Now let us look at individual components. Let's start with Node. Node is officially known as Node.js actually. As I mentioned, this is a server-side environment, JavaScript runtime environment. Means on the server side, if you want to develop code in JavaScript, then you require Node. If you always think like JavaScript runs only on the browser, that's not true. On the server side, you can have Node to run the JavaScript. It is built on something called V8 JavaScript engine, which you find also in the browsers, whether it is browser or on the server side. Ultimately, it is V8 JavaScript engine as of that at the time of writing this session. V8 is the JavaScript engine which runs both in the browsers as well as in the node environment. So that is the one which actually provides a JavaScript flavor for us. The node, if you are running on Unix machine, any Unix machine, or Linux, or Mac, or Windows, node is available on all of them. So don't worry about it. Look, a brief look at the node. It was created by Randai in 2010. That is about 15 years ago from now. And it is open source. You can even check the code also. In 2023, we got the latest version, that is 21, latest stable version I'm talking about. Version 21 of Node is the latest stable version. Often when you install Node, it comes with another tool called NPM, which stands for Node Package Manager. So Node is server environment, but that environment is not just sufficient for you to develop a full stack application. You may want to use several third-party libraries. Those libraries are supplied in the form of packages, node packages. So to search where those node packages are and to download and install those node packages on your machine, you require somebody called a Node Package Manager, or NPM, that comes along with Node. All right, so that way NPM helps in installing packages on the bare metal node environment. Remember, MERN runs on node. Why we are talking about node is because that N in the MERN is node. So it runs on node. So go ahead and install and verify your node setup from that particular URL. This is the first thing you need to do. ID is the first one, of course, that is for JavaScript. And the next step is to go for this node environment. Then comes the Express framework. I told that you may use several third-party libraries which are available as node packages. This is one of them. Express is officially known as Express.js, and it was written in 2010 by somebody, Holo Vechuk. I may be wrong in pronunciation, but that's how it is phonetically. It's obviously a JavaScript framework, and it is used for building the so-called REST APIs on the Node platform. REST APIs, maybe at a later point of time, we dwell very deep into this area. But for now, if you haven't seen it about REST API, just remember that REST API is a way to expose the server's functionality to the client machines. Whether it is your mobile app or a web app or a desktop application, when you say, I'm connecting to a server, on the server, you need to have the REST API. There are several other options, but in modern applications, it's almost all the cases that you see REST API running on the server side. So Express framework is to build such REST APIs for your application. REST means obviously the web architecture, right? So it uses HTTP as the transport protocol. When you say REST, most likely it is going to be, you are going to use HTTP as the transport protocol so that you can develop REST APIs in the form of GET or POST or PUT or delete operations. It supports REST path expressions. It supports REST query strings, and also it supports the payloads in the form of JSON. If it is for the first time you are hearing these names, these terms like JSON or query strings and etc., don't worry too much about them, but just make a note that they do exist and they are important for us. When we talk about REST, you obviously get to know about them. So how do you install this this Express framework? As I mentioned, you have somebody called NPM to install any node package. Express.js is being a node package, you just use NPM. All you need to do is like, once you install node, then you just say NPM install Express. It just installs the Express framework for your application or on your project. Then comes MongoDB. MongoDB is the data platform, right, in the MERN full stack. In case you are not requiring any database, that's a different thing. But in most likely, in most of the cases, you require some database. In MERN full stack, we prefer or we use MongoDB as the data platform. It's a NoSQL database system. When we say NoSQL, it means it's not standard SQL database like Oracle. Rather, it's a schema-less database where you don't require to have upfront table designs and etc. Again, if it is first time that you are hearing something called NoSQL or MongoDB, don't worry too much about the things that I'm going to talk here, but get yourself familiarized with those wording so that next time when you read something or when you hear something, you can easily relate to what we are saying. To gain the command on those topics, that we need to wait, right? We cannot learn everything in just one go. So MongoDB is schema-less, that's why it is NoSQL, and it was released in 2009. The latest stable version is 6, and it also runs on multiple platforms. So whether you are running on Windows or Mac or any Linux flavor, MongoDB is most likely available for you as well. We know relational databases, right? Most likely we know that one. And there we organize that data in the form of records in tables. Whereas in MongoDB, we organize the data in the form of records in collections. Instead of tables, you have something called collections. If a table is a table consists of several records in RDBMS, here in MongoDB, you have collections and they consist of several records. These records are in the form of documents. That is interesting. In the RDBMS, each record is just a fixed set of values, whereas here it is in the form of JSON-like document. If you know JSON, you can assume most likely it's as if like it is just JSON only. So it is name-value pairs. Essentially, it is name-value pairs because it is schema-less. No two JSON documents may have the same name-value pairs. Right? So each document consists of key-value pairs or name-value pairs, and these keys can be different in different documents. But of course, we need to design the way we want. It supports that. And the field values can be simple numbers or booleans, strings, or array of other values, or again, some other JSON document. Okay, a brief intro to MongoDB. So if you think that I know RDBMS, so I can work with MongoDB, no. It's a completely different technology dealing with data storage and retrieval. You need to know JavaScript and JSON and etc. to deal with or to work with MongoDB. So in order for that, you require some installation, right? So you can download community edition of MongoDB, which is free. So you can download it. And MongoDB is just a server, database server, right? So you may require some client to interact with Mongo database so that you can visualize the collections. You can run some queries for testing purpose and etc. Debugging and etc. So that's where you'll be using something called MongoDB Compass. If you are interested in it, go ahead and download that one as well. And the next one, I think the last one, is React library. This is officially known as React.js. As many times we already pointed out, it is meant for building the web clients, right? Web clients, even though people also use it for standard clients, standalone clients and mobile clients, majorly it is used for web clients. It was created by somebody called Jordan Wake at Meta. You know, Meta is the erstwhile Facebook. This is also written in JavaScript and open sourced in 2013. The latest stable version is 18. So make sure you have that you are going to use that version of React.js. If you are seeing this presentation at a later point of time, figure out what is the latest stable version and better to use that version. The React library is built on top of CSS, HTML, and an extension to JavaScript. We call it as like JAX. JavaX, sorry, JSX, sorry. Okay, that means to deal with React, you need to know HTML, JS, CSS, without which there is nothing you can do with React.js. Right? So you may say like, Krishna, I already developed some front end using HTML, JS, and CSS. What is the need of using React again? Using React, you can develop the UI components that are reusable. Once you develop a component using React, that same component, you may be able to use it in different applications, which is not simply possible by using that bare metal HTML, JS, and CSS. So that's why we use a component framework like React. Okay, so this is the length and breadth of MERN stack. You need to know Mongo, you need to know React, you need to know Node, and you need to also know Express framework to work with MERN. They cover front end as well as back end along with the databases. Good news is that they all can be mastered as long as you know JavaScript minimum. Plus, you need to know a few other things. Right? So that's about the introduction to MERN stack. So in summary, MERN stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. And it is a technology suite for building full stack applications. A full stack application is essentially something that consists of both front end as well as back end. When we say front end, it provides user interface, and whereas back end provides the business functionality, typically with the support of databases. In the MERN stack, MongoDB acts as the data platform. Express exposes the business functionality using REST API on the Node platform. React is meant for developing UI reusable components or UI, web UI, and Node is essentially the underlying platform for running any of these things. Right? So with this, now we will be getting into individually each of those areas. It is always better to start with something that is little familiar or little visually appealing. Right? So that's why typically we start with the front end when we learn MERN. There are some building blocks which we require for building the front end applications. No matter which framework you are using, whether it is React.js or Angular or anything, these building blocks are the ones which are always there. They are HTML, CSS, and the protocol called HTTP. All right, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and HTTP stands for Hypertext Transport Protocol. The HTTP is the one which connects the client and server here. So that means you will be developing a web architecture, right? Applications around the web architecture to get the overall picture. So the next topics are essentially on these building blocks, reviewing some concepts of these building blocks so that we get ready for learning the React.js to begin with. React is our front end, right? So to begin with React, we'll be reviewing, we'll be recollecting, or we'll be just quickly revise the HTML, CSS, and HTTP in the subsequent sessions, right? So that's it for now. Thank you.